All right. Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the space. Hopefully everybody can hear us and we don't have any tech issues tonight. If we do have any issues, please raise your hand and let us know. We will be taking questions later, but first we're going to interview Patrick Riley and we're joined by Jace as well from Cosmic Origins. And I'm really excited about this discussion, cryptocurrency and suppressed technology. It's one of the things that I'm really excited about right now because, all this UFO flap and this drone incursion and everything that's happening right now, it's going to ultimately lead to the discussion of advanced propulsion and free energy, zero-point technology, which is something that Patrick Riley is developing himself. And it very much involves cryptocurrency and blockchains and NFTs. And the blockchain will be used as a way to roll out this technology and these free energy systems, as opposed to applying for a patent like we used to have to do in the past. The world is changing and the technology is changing as well. But before that, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Aaron. He wasn't here for the first space because he had some family or friends in town. But Aaron, if you want to hop on and say anything.
Hey guys, great to be here. Looking forward to this. I'm really excited about this topic, so I can't wait to hear all the amazing information. And yeah, I'm excited. It's gonna be a good time. Great to have you all here.
Right, and I'm just going to remind anybody to mute themselves whenever they're not talking, so we don't have any weird feedback. And so I don't know if everyone here knows who Patrick Riley is and Jace, but I guess I'll give them both a chance to introduce themselves. Patrick is developing some technologies like Overunity generators, Ionic drive circuits, and quantum heliospheres and faster than light travel technology. So, Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, as always, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'll try to make my background a little bit quick because it can be a bit lengthy. So I come from a military background. I was civil affairs and psyops for 17 years in the Army. Back in 2009, I had a TBI, and with my TBI, I became an acquired savant and started inventing things. In 2021, I launched Reaper Financial, which was the beginning of 7 companies that are now under Quantum Financial Systems, LLC. But we have Reaper Financial, Ascension Index, ARC Institute, Pillars, Box, StakeX, or StakeFi is recently being acquired. And we have Fortify Homes. So a lot of different blockchain application companies. And like I said, I also do inventions, and I did release at the Quantum Summit in 2024 the plans for a Overunity generator device, as well as a Ionic drive circuit, a quantum heliosphere, and faster than light travel, like you mentioned. I do have about 30 other inventions and technologies that are kind of above the pale that I have not yet released, but I chose to release those on the blockchain and NFTs to avoid asking the government's permission, because I don't need it. And the 1951 Patent Secrecy Act enables the government to basically charge you with espionage for releasing your own technology if you apply for a patent. So I'm not giving them that opportunity. And so that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, thank you. And there's so much to dive into there. Before we get the conversation started, Jace, if you want to just take a brief moment to introduce yourself and what your involvement is with, cryptocurrency and what you're doing in that arena and how it's actually going to tie in with what Patrick is doing.
Yeah, hey guys, thanks for having me on. Thank you, Tyler and Aaron, and good to connect with you too, Patrick. I've been following what you've been doing with Reaper and that whole ecosystem for a few years now. So yeah, big fan of your work and learning about all the, suppressed technology stuff that you're working on as well. So yeah, I went into my background deeper on the last space, so I'll keep it real short here. But my background was originally in aerospace engineering. I went to a school called Cal Poly, studying aerospace engineering in college, and I was the president of the Aerospace Society there, the AIAA. and I was working pretty closely with the local Air Force Base, now Space Force Base, Vandenberg. And that's when I had my big spiritual awakening, learning about these black budget programs. I had professors that were involved in this that were kind of, casually leaking this to us in very subtle ways. And that's where I had my awakening. Ended up leaving that field after college. I never went to work for any aerospace companies because I was pretty jaded about it after that. And that's when I found crypto in 2020. I was pretty opposed to crypto before that. And then somebody had told me about XRP, and it was at 17 cents, which was a big synchronicity for me. So I kind of listened to that nudge from spirit, if you will, and started investing, and then started coaching people in 2021 after, really diving into it for a year. And then I started a online academy called the Conscious Crypto Academy in 2022 that helps new investors on board and learn all about XRP and the ecosystem, and how to invest, how to use wallets, how to take advantage of DeFi. And it's been pretty much, these are the two biggest passions of mine: cryptocurrency and this whole aerospace suppressed technology realm. So the merging and the marriage of the two is something that really fascinates me, and I think that's what we're going to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we'll just jump right in. Patrick, as far as your technology that you're developing, inventing, let's start with the Overunity generator. From my understanding, that's a generator that could potentially power a home, a city, whatever we need it to power, unlimited, for an unlimited amount of time with zero cost. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't say zero cost. You still have to build the generator itself, but you would be pulling energy basically from the ether. I know ether is still a little bit of a controversial term, but for anybody out there that, this is maybe a new topic to you, or this isn't something you're familiar with, there's some very basic understanding that we'd have to get out of the way. The first is that energy is not created by any of the power sources that we use in today's society. Basically, what we're doing is we are harnessing electricity from the surrounding space or surrounding ether, and it is traveling along or outside of those copper wires or whatever other means of transmission. Now, when we look at a very basic level, all electricity that we are producing today, with the sole exception of solar power, of course, using the sun's energy, but everything else we produce is done through a very simple mechanism, and that simple mechanism is creating rotation of a stable magnet against a copper wire, and that copper wire then channels electricity from the outside, which then goes through the wire. Now, I know somebody out there is thinking nuclear doesn't do that. That's actually exactly how nuclear power works. You're just creating steam with the evaporation of water using the radiological reaction within the water, or the nuclear reaction underwater. And that steam is then turning a turbine, and that turbine is turning what's basically an alternator or a magnet inside a copper coil. Same thing is done for hydroelectric dams. Same thing is done inside your car or your lawnmower or your motorcycle or just about anything else we operate today. So creating spin or creating motion without loss of electricity, that is the goal.
Right. So maybe you can help me understand this. I recently spent some time with a quantum physicist in Sedona. He's 85 years old. He worked 40 years for the shadow government, reverse engineering extraterrestrial craft, UFOs. And he was explaining to me the technology that they have developed within these black budget programs as far as quantum. I don't know if you call it a quantum drive, but he said the secret is that your turbine or whatever it is, your generator that you're trying to spin, he said, if it spins to the right, it creates heat. If it spins to the left, it creates cool air. It creates cold. And that's the secret to a non-combustible solid state hydrogen motor, let's say. And he said it's really that simple. It's a matter of just reversing the spin, and that's how they maintain it. That's how it maintains its temperature without overheating. Would you agree with that, or do you know anything about that?
I don't think that the direction of the spin would necessarily play into whether or not you're producing heat. It's more about the resistance or the friction. In my motor, I'm facing magnetic resistance or winding resistance of putting a magnet against a copper coil. But yeah, I couldn't necessarily speak to any other expert or person out there. I generally don't speak to anyone else's testimony. If they're saying that they've been a part of a program over the years, I'm very much a school of thought where true wisdom comes from knowing that I know nothing. So I would never call anyone else a liar or support them if I don't know. I would just say I will more than happily go out and test it and see if that's the result I get.
Right. That's really interesting. So, okay, can you maybe explain how, okay, so if you're going to release this technology on the blockchain, why is that the ideal way to release this technology? What makes it so impenetrable?
Yeah, so in order for them to take down the NFTs of the designs that I've released, they would need to take down the Bitcoin network, take down the Ethereum network, Solana network, XRP Ledger, and I've got on about 15 different networks now where there's NFTs minted of my designs. Those designs minted to the blockchain are hosted throughout multiple nodes across thousands of computers, or basically anyone who is supporting running that network. So for the government to go through the trouble of suppressing my designs, they would have to go through the trouble of suppressing their own long-term plans.
Jace, did you have anything to add to that or anything on that subject?
I mean, I just think it's brilliant, and I think he's so right that these blockchains have become a part of the kind of global direction that I would say both the light and the dark are trying to partake in and use to their own advantage. So it's to the advantage of probably every special interest group at this point to keep these blockchains up and running, especially Bitcoin, XRP, Ethereum, like the top five especially. So I just think it's super smart, and it's something that I've been sharing with my students as like one of the ways that this has been, connected in terms of, crypto actually physically allowing, this kind of technology and these schematics and things to come out into the public where you can't just have elaborated and have all the things taken like with Tesla or Otis Carr or any of these other, historic figures who have tried to bring out this technology over the last, 70 years or so.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, okay, Patrick, let's move on to your ionic drive circuits. Maybe we can go through each one of these inventions and kind of just give a brief rundown of what they're supposed to do, because I know some of them are still theory, but I think the ionic drive circuit is the other one that you have actually, it's operable.
Yes, Ionic Drive is something that's been built. MIT has public information on these, and basically what you're doing with an Ionic drive is you're creating a spark gap between a live wire and a grounding wire, where the energy transferred from the live to the ground is pushing positive ions through space. And there's quite a few amateur, YouTube videos out there of people making these types of propellers, basically, using ionic drive. But what I did very differently is with the circuit. So basically, I created a system where I can deny rest to those positive ions as they transfer through a circuit of these hot plates and cold plates, or the live plate and the grounding plate. And in doing that and denying rest, I'm able to amplify thrust coming out of that ionic drive, and I'm also able to compress it. So these can essentially become a replacement for any other type of traditional thruster or jet engines on airplanes. If we were to look to replace a jet engine on an airplane with an electric solution, then the ionic drive circuit would be that solution.
Right. And I mean, I think that we're stepping into that arena inevitably. So, I mean, what's your opinion? Like, how do you implement these technologies? Like, how does it eventually catch on?
Well, I think with the Overunity generator, cryptocurrency plays a vital role because you can get paid and or save money by producing energy that you use for mining. So as soon as people realize that they can build my design and use that to mine Bitcoin at no energy cost in addition to what they're producing, or in addition to building of the device itself, I think that in itself breeds adoption. Then you can look at things like using a Starlink with a VPN to mine Monero, where somebody could potentially be almost completely anonymous, while using this electric device to produce basically free money for themselves. So there's definitely an avenue for adoption there. When it comes to the Ionic drive circuit, that's more of a mainstream thing that I think could definitely get adoption within the next 10 years with or without my help. And that's really just coming down to cost savings. Everything's about business and everything's about how people make money using these inventions so that they have a motive to build them and to deploy them.
Now, what would you say to somebody who would argue the point that these technologies have already been invented by black budget programs, a shadow government, for lack of a better term, but because they would argue that these things already exist, right? So I guess your goal would be to make it publicly available because it's never going to come from them. So we have to do it ourselves. Is that the way I understand that?
Yeah, that's exactly accurate. And I would say that nothing that I have invented is new per se. I expect there's probably hundreds of people who have invented similar generators, probably well before I was born. And as you said, the black budget programs most definitely have these things. They're not, if they're spending tens of $millions on the sex habits of mosquitoes, I'm pretty sure they're spending billions of dollars on high level physics that we just don't know about. So I have no question that they've already got this technology and already surpassed this technology. But I do want to make this available to everybody. And the main reason for that is because I've lost faith in the government to have the best interests of the people at heart. And because I don't trust that they have our best interests at heart, I don't trust that them suppressing technology is for our safety so much as for their profit and control. And so for that reason, I've chosen this route of open sourcing it.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I mean, it is going to come from us. Disclosure is going to come from us. I mean, it already is. And it's becoming more and more apparent with these hearings and this nonsense that, we're getting from the talking heads on TV. So let's move into the quantum heliosphere and then the faster than light travel. And then we'll get to Jace, and we're going to bring in, the elements of the Space Force and Starlink and XRP and how that's all tied in with this free energy technology.
Yep. So the quantum heliosphere is using a live human cell that's it's called a HeLa, or a Henrietta Lacks cell. These are cells from a lady that had cancer back in the 1950s, and her cancer cells were essentially immortal. So because they're essentially immortal and they reproduce almost identical, and they also reproduce with elongated telomeres, which is it's a whole biological thing. If you're not a biologist and you're listening, don't worry about it. Basically, they have great genes. And so because they're immortal and they reproduce identically, they are perfect candidates for quantum entanglement. So what I designed is to use these heliospheres through generations of breeding. You can enlarge them, similar to the way that a shark that grows up in a fish tank will not outgrow that fish tank. But if you put it in an ocean, it could become 9 feet long. So with these Helios cells, we would be able to grow them through multiple generations to make them about the size of a golf ball. And then with this golf ball sized cancer cell, we would be able to basically implant iron markers using Fe3, just like what we already have in our blood. And you'd be able to implant a grid of points that can be measured within this cell. Now, one cell can be brought down to near freezing using helium-3, and it can be brought up with frequency until it interlocks with another cell. That's how we achieve quantum entanglement. And then we would know based on the rotation of the cell, because you would have a north and south pole, we would know every single degree or every turn of the cell that represents a bit of data. So right now, the way a computer works is we have ones and zeros, and that's basically a yes or a no. And when people talk about quantum computing, they're usually thinking of superposition, which is you have a 1 and a 0 simultaneously. With the quantum heliosphere, what we would basically have is a ball with a north and south pole, and it would have 32,000 places or degrees or mils, if you will, marked within this sphere. And with each rotation of just 1 degree, we would be able to send hundreds of bits of data. So that gives us the ability to send data across space and time, regardless of distance. So if we are going to be an interstellar society, if we're going to be an interplanetary society, just looking at Mars to Earth at optimal conditions, there's a 3 light-minute delay, and at suboptimal conditions, depending on the seasons, you're at a 21-minute light-minute delay. So that means that cryptocurrency, if we were to say that cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum had to operate on both Mars and Earth, it wouldn't actually be possible with proof of work and proof of stake, because there'd be that delay of 3 to 21 minutes, making it no longer feasible. So the quantum heliosphere basically solves that time delay in long-range communication.
Wow, that's huge. And I mean, I think that, Jace, you shared with me an old Space Force recruitment video that talked about banking in space. Can you explain what that video meant to you and how you think, like, what were they trying to tell us? Banking in space.
Yeah, for sure. This has been something I've been really interested in the last few years, is the connections between XRP, Space Force, Starlink, Elon, X.com, PayPal Mafia. And, Space Force obviously is working with Elon's company, with SpaceX and with Starlink launching the satellites. So there's big connections there. But yeah, in this recruitment video from I think 2 or 3 years ago, it was specifically about securing the war-fighting domain of banking in space, and how banking in space is going to be a very important thing. And they had also posted a meme about this too, in saying something basically along the lines of that Space Force. It was like, nobody knows Space Force actually controls, all the money and all the ATMs. And it makes me think, like Patrick was talking about earlier with the blockchain, there's all these nodes, right? So that's what makes blockchain different than traditional networks, where, if you're talking about a traditional network from a big tech company like, Google or IBM or whatever it is, typically they have one or a few server locations. And if those servers are destroyed, that data is also destroyed for the most part. But with blockchain, it's distributed across the whole planet. So you have multiple nodes across the entire planet. And we know with XRP that there are, from what I've heard, there's at least one, if not a few nodes in underground nuclear bunkers. And I would venture to guess that there's probably already nodes on satellites powered by Space Force. And if that's not already happening, I would think that that's probably something that's going to happen very soon. And it's something that Elon has already kind of teased with Doge. He talked about putting Doge validators on Starlink satellites. So my guess would be that this is probably already happening in some degree. And I think, Space Force is most likely deeply involved in what's going on with XRP. Especially, we know Trump is a big supporter of American cryptos, and Bitcoin and Ethereum are, arguably not very American when you look into the backing of them and who's controlling the nodes and the mining pools and where the money is coming from. And there's a great documentary that talks about this by Fruition Productions on fruitionproductions.com that talks about the big Chinese money that came in to basically destroy XRP and Ripple, collaborate with JP Morgan and the SEC, and take Ethereum to be basically the new global currency for everybody. And the top of the money leads back to, these groups. And so we know Trump's a big fan of American cryptos. Ripple, being associated with XRP, is actually obviously American. So I think that would be probably the group that Space Force would choose to work with. And then there's other connections as well, like, XLM, the Stellar Network, is on the surface kind of a competitor to XRP and Ripple, but I think probably there's more going on behind the scenes there from what they're letting on. But basically, one of the key founders of Ripple, Jed McCaleb, left the company and he went and created Stellar XLM. And he also has a company called Vast Aerospace. And there's certain connections and partnerships going on between Elon with SpaceX and with Vast. So we know there's already, connections there. And I think it's not too far of a reach to think that XRP is also involved with that. And then, there's connections going back to X.com, the original X.com, back when it was, Elon and Peter Thiel primarily. And this was, the group known as the PayPal Mafia. And I think that this kind of agenda or this mission that they were on is what we're seeing play out today in real time. Peter Thiel was actually one of the founding or angel investors, basically one of the original investors into the company that would become Ripple back when it was called OpenCoin. And I think that connection is probably still there. And then, JD Vance is kind of Peter Thiel's understudy. They work very closely together. And Peter Thiel also has his founders fund. And there's all these different places that when you kind of connect the dots, it really looks like Space Force, Trump, XRP, Elon, and the PayPal Mafia are working in collaboration to essentially, I think, take down the NWO central banking cartels and create this new free, what people call the quantum financial system or the QFS, and XRP and possibly Stellar XLM being the backbones of that new financial system.
So basically, I guess these nodes would be the best way to decentralize a network, and that's probably the ultimate goal, or one of the goals, is to decentralize this banking system. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think that's what they were kind of letting on to in this video that they had put out a few years ago on the recruiting page, that you need to have a decentralized infrastructure because in the world we're in now, things are very volatile. Obviously, there's a lot of war going on, and if you have very important systems that are located in just one country or just one location geographically, that is a threat to the longevity of that system. So that's why I think, a lot of people ask me, like, what would happen if there was, a big blackout or a big solar flare, and, it took out a bunch of the technology in the grid. And, coincidentally, Elon had just tweeted, I think yesterday, about getting a Starlink because you never know when the comms grid is going to go down, which I think was kind of a nod to, this potential happening if they're going to try to pull a fast one, around the time Trump comes in. But yeah, I think, shoot, I totally brain farted on where I was going with that. But what were we saying again?
No, the original question was about the nodes being the best way to decentralize the network, and you were going from there. But
so if you have it spread out, basically it's more proof against that system. And I remember where I was going with the blackout and the solar flare, because that's kind of people's concern with a digital money system. And my understanding is that the way that the XRP ledger and most blockchains work is that as long as one of those nodes survives, even if there's a blackout of the system and the blockchain goes down, solar flare or whatever, as long as the data on one of those nodes survives, it can repopulate that data to the whole system. So unless we have such a crazy solar flare or cataclysmic event that we get sent back to the Stone Age, I don't think we have anything to worry about. And, in that timeline, we probably have bigger fish to fry.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to paint a picture like we're doing to show how all of this is connected with Patrick's inventions being released on the blockchain, but also being necessary for this, space banking to even exist with this quantum heliosphere, this quantum entanglement, faster than light travel and trade between money. I mean, if you're talking planet to planet trade, it's really interesting to start taking a conversation there, but I'm sure on some level it's already happening. And Patrick, I guess we'll get back to you with your, faster than light technology. What does that look like?
Yeah, so faster than light is one of those funny things to me because everyone's, conditioned through mainstream academia to believe that there's actually a light speed limit, which is a little bit ridiculous of a concept, just on the face of it. It back in early 1900s, it was actually believed that a car couldn't go faster than 100 miles per hour because it would liquefy the person that was in the car. And that's kind of the same thing going on with light speed right now. But just on the premise of relativity, if you're able to move 10 miles per hour in any direction and you were to shine a light, then that light should be moving faster than light speed. But that all aside, so my design is basically using ultraviolet C radiation, or UVC light, or basically a black light, in a very, very high concentration. So ultraviolet C radiation is the largest photon particles that we're aware of. And because they're very large, they're actually large enough to move solid objects. So if you were to hold up tinfoil or gold foil, something of that nature, and shine a very strong ultraviolet C light at that foil, you're able to physically move that foil out of the way using this UVC light. Now, the way that I've designed this for faster than light travel is basically if you were to put a very large torch flashlight of ultraviolet C radiation on the front of your vessel as you were traveling through space, you would be able to, if you're using my Overunity generator, produce enough energy and enough concentration of light that you would be effectively pushing space out of your way in front of the craft. In addition to that, we can look at things like entropy and the distance of space between atoms and electrons. And most of all solid objects are actually empty. They're, the distance between one atom to another is infinitesimal when you get really small. So if we were able to use ultraviolet C radiation to control the location of what's in front of us and say align it into a grid using a frequency of that ultraviolet C radiation, you would also be able to align the craft that is moving through it. You're aligning it at the atomic level into a grid, but you're offsetting your grid from the grid in front of it. Now there's no friction. So if you were able to basically do this with your hand and a desk, for example, you'd be able to use your hand and smack the desk, but instead of actually making contact with the desk, your hand would go right through it because there's so much space between the atoms and electrons. So that's what we can do with ultraviolet C radiation. We can remove the resistance of space in front of an object. And so the reason I released those 4 specific technologies, the Overunity, the Ionic drive circuit, the quantum heliosphere, and faster than light travel, is because using each one of those has a million different applications in and of itself. But using those 4 together, we would be able to theoretically send out a probe, say 10 light years away from the Earth. You'd be able to use something akin to Hubble or JW Webb space telescope, and you would be able to look back at the Earth from 10 light years away, and the light that is reaching that probe is 10 light years old. So we would be seeing the Earth as it was 10 years ago. However, because we have instantaneous quantum communication across time and space, we can communicate the picture we're seeing in real time. So that means we'd be able to record the real history of the Earth. We'd be able to record and watch events like the assassination of JFK and the magic bullet. We'd be able to rewatch 9/11 and find out more detail. We'd be able to watch Jesus walk the earth, or watch how the pyramids were built, or how humanity evolved. You'd be able to basically create a 4-dimensional Google Earth. And that would be completely peer-reviewed and scientifically reproducible. Anyone could build this and go out and do the exact same thing and get presumably the same result. It would actually be more interesting if they got different results, because that says a lot about consciousness.
Wow.
Can I jump in? I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Patrick, do you think this is similar to what people describe as the looking glass technology, or do you feel it's totally different?
It's a very different design than Project Looking Glass, which is definitely not on level 7 and S4 under the Groom Lake facility. Totally not. But so Project Looking Glass uses theoretical projection of warping time to look forward in time, whereas this would be using the actual collection of light data and sending that data across time and space to be reinterpreted as basically a photo or a video. It would be very undifferent from the way that we take pictures and videos on our phone.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. And eventually maybe we can get into a little bit of your time in the military in just a little bit here, Patrick. But going back to the speed of light, so there's a Professor Hartmut Muller. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a professor at the University of Applied Sciences. And he has a quote that I always liked. He said, "By believing in the unsurpassable speed of light, humanity isolates itself from the rest of the galaxy," which kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying earlier about us not being able to believe that we could travel faster than 100 miles an hour in a car without liquefying. You isolate yourself from the potentials beyond that point. So it's just a matter of reaching that level, I think, collectively, on a collective scale, before we all understand it's possible. But then that brings into question the Navy patent of the mass reduction device, which, essentially reduces the mass of an object as it approaches the speed of light. Therefore, it can travel faster than the speed of light, because as an object increases in speed, it increases in mass, theoretically. So this solves that problem. But I find it interesting that you're talking about essentially time travel now. Whenever you're sending a probe out 10 light years away, and then you're able to record the history of the Earth. In the Sands of Times books by Sean David Morton, they describe this mass reduction device in a little more detail. And those books actually explain the origins of time travel within the private sector, within the shadow government. And it says that the mass reduction device is the same technology used for biological time travel. They said the plasma bubble creates a field where it would appear that there is no mass inside of it. Therefore, it can travel much faster than the speed of light. And then within the field, they're essentially existing in zero time. Does that resonate with you, Patrick?
It does, creating a plasma bubble, which within that bubble, something would have essentially, I don't know that no mass or mass reduction would be a good terminology for it. There's still going to be a concentration of matter that would have mass. However, if the ions and quarks and atoms and all the things within that matter were to be independently supporting themselves without relation to anything else in the environment, then they would essentially have no observable effect of gravity, which gravity is a term I really despise because it's not a force. But yes, that is something that would definitely be possible or potential. I will say that time travel, to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, time travel is something that we know is possible. From a scientific perspective, it was actually Google that proved that they could move time back and forth within a small time crystal computer processor level type of thing. The problem with time travel, especially of a biological or any kind of object, is not so much the time as it is the location, because you have a moving universe, you have a moving galaxy, a moving solar system, and a moving planet. And to be frank, we have no point of reference. So if you're going to want to know where something was, thousands of years ago, or 100 years ago, or 10 years ago, you're going to need some stable data point from 10 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, from which to transport that thing that you've got now back to that time. I definitely think that's possible. And as I said, with the technology I released, we would be able to observe that. I don't know if that would give us enough information yet to have a point of reference to transfer something from the current time to the past.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I don't know if you've read those books, probably not, but they explain, in the book, they even include equations. So they don't just explain the origins of time travel, they tell you how to do it. And there's 9 books in the series, 7 of them are out. And within the 9 books, if you read between the lines, it essentially tells you exactly how they've done it and how you can do it yourself. But they said that there's maybe 5 people on the planet that would actually know what to do with the equations that are in those books. And, Sean David Morton, the author of those books, unfortunately passed away 2 days ago. He was wrongfully imprisoned and given throat cancer and did not survive that journey. And people believe it's because he released these books. So if anyone's interested in the Sands of Time series by Sean David Morton, I believe that they hold a lot of secrets and a lot of missing gaps in our history. But Jace or Aaron, actually, Aaron, by the way, you can just hop in anytime you want. But did you want to say anything to this?
Oh man, I mean, there's so much here. It's a big topic, but I've just been enjoying listening to Patrick and Jace. I mean, they're incredible, and you guys are a wealth of information. You probably know a lot more than I do on both of these topics, so I've just been enjoying listening to you guys. But we're in a very interesting time right now, and it seems like things are speeding up. It seems like we're in this very critical time in history. Where we have the awakening going on, we have it's kind of like a time where, at least up until recently, it looked like we could either go in this very dark timeline, this very, very dark timeline, or go towards this very bright timeline, right? Golden age. And in my opinion, especially with the events that I've felt for a long time we're pretty much on a very solidly good timeline. But that being said, we can't be complacent. But with the events of the last 6 months, it's become very clear to me where, the future looks very bright. Again, we can't be complacent though. We need all hands on deck, and we need to spread this information. How do you see things playing out in the coming few years of, it seems like, we got the drone stuff going on. We got UFO sightings off the charts. It seems like ETs are kind of pushing disclosure themselves. A lot of this technology, this free energy technology and anti-gravity and all the rest of it has come from ET tech, like reverse engineered craft, and come from ET sources in the first place. Even Tesla, said he was channeling it from somewhere else, and you could make the argument he was the starseed, that he was an ET himself or whatever. But it's, of course, over the last 100+ years been very ruthlessly suppressed and made sure to never see the light of day and never help humanity. And instead it's been turned and weaponized against humanity. Well, now, you could really make an argument like the internet itself being released to the public was divine intervention or benevolent intervention. And that has been a crucial role in the awakening, in my opinion. And then you have now the blockchain and crypto on top of that coming out. And you could say the same for that. And it's almost like it almost seems to me like they're benevolent forces that made sure those things specifically were able to come out, and that there was a pathway laid for, no matter how hard the dark tries to suppress things, it's going to be able to come out, right? And the awakening is going to be able to happen. And and they're not going to be able to forever get away with suppressing and enslaving humanity, which is unfortunately their plans, as we know. And, there's talk about fake alien invasion, all the rest of it, and trying to, these last ditch efforts to try to solidify their new world order and lock things down. All right. Well, I don't think it's going to work, but they're still going to try. But anyways, sorry, this is I digress. How do you guys see things playing out in the coming years with the release of technology and also the transitioning of the financial system to this, to like blockchain technology and things?
Yeah,
that's a big open-ended question. So sorry about that.
Whoever wants to take that one, Jace or Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So I think Patrick laid out really well the technical side of how crypto and these technologies are going to be integrated. And I think the other side of the coin is the spiritual transition and the consciousness shift that's happening, and how this wealth transfer itself is going to give the money to the people who have a fascination and an interest in bringing these kinds of things out. And that's where I'm seeing on the big picture that, it seems to me that only particular people are feeling guided to XRP. For instance, XRP as its own kind of phenomena. I've said on Twitter and stuff before, I feel like it's a spiritual phenomena because some people are super guided to it. The XRP community on X and in general is, to me, the most spiritual, connected, activated crypto community out there. And I've heard like Bitcoin maxis and other crypto communities say that same thing as well. They look at the XRP people and they're like, they'll often call, XRP folks a cult or whatever, because that's the way that it's kind of viewed from the outside. But I think there's a reason that there's such this passionate interest, and why, like, for instance, I've met so many people who were in the same position I was, where I didn't get a good vibe about Bitcoin. I didn't get a good vibe about Ethereum. That kept me away from crypto before I started investing. And then something about XRP just gave me this like full body activation and like intuitive hit that, yeah, there's something to this. And I know, Tyler, you and I have kind of talked about privately a little bit the idea of like timeline wars going on with XRP as this kind of inevitable technology that both the dark and the light are trying to control. And so there's the people that are super drawn to it, and then there's the people who absolutely hate it and despise it and think it's, a piece of crap and like it's never going to become anything. And, all these lies get spread about it being super centralized and all this stuff from a fear-based perspective. And what I've seen is that those kind of people are usually more in crypto for their own personal gain and their own personal financial benefit, whereas XRP folks typically are in crypto because they want to make the world a better place and they want to use this money to actually serve humanity. So that's where I see this whole, kind of suppressed technology thing coming in on a spiritual level, is that I feel like God, spirit, source, creator is guiding the right people who have the right intentions, who have missions to bring out these kind of technologies and also use it to fund other kinds of things like healing centers, communities, all sorts of things. Everyone's got kind of their own background. So I think that that's going to be a key part of how these things come out, is that when this wealth transfer happens, and it's happening right now, XRP is already up like 400 or 500% in the last month alone. And I think that's just getting started. I think this wealth transfer is going to put the money in the hands of the few who have good intentions. And that's going to be a massive shift. I mean, even just look at what Elon has done as a single person with his massive amount of wealth. And now imagine millions of Elons, in that respect, of people who are going to use the money for, good. And I know, maybe Elon is, has kind of censored Patrick in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that's him directly, but Patrick seems to be pretty shadow banned on here. So I hope that's not actually coming from Elon. And I'm hoping that that's a Twitter thing that's still coded in there, but we'll see, we'll find out. But, just in the sense of like millions of people with a lot of money, I think can shift the world very quickly. And that's where I think we get a pretty, almost overnight scenario of, the planet being able to shift into a positive direction when the money is in the hands of the people who actually want to be stewards of the planet.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Patrick, what do you have to say about that? And in particular the Elon suppressing you, because it was really interesting to me that I can't actually search you on X. And I do know that you can report accounts on X. So do you think it could be just a simple case of your account being reported by some haters, or do you think this is beyond that? And then also your opinion on, moving forward, this technology and the financial shift.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with my infamous shadow banning. So it is a bit beyond that. So what basically happened for anyone that doesn't know me, I ran for president of the United States. This was in 2023, and I was not shadow banned at all until that happened. When you run for president or any political office, you have to apply for a specific type of account so that you can run political ads on X or on Twitter, and as well as any other social media. So I went through the long process of applying for that, which they actually tried to stonewall me, and they even tried to deny me the ability to use my my federal election campaign funds to run ads. They tried to get me to use personal funds, which would have been a violation of the FEC guidelines and rules, and potentially a felony. But then once I actually posted up a expose on Ukraine and some of the genocide and human rights violations going on in Ukraine, as well as a peace plan, that was when my shadow ban came in very heavy. So that is kind of what's behind that, is that I said too much truth and they didn't want it out there, kind of thing, as usual, right? When it comes to where we're going in the future, I'll say that I'm very much not an optimist or a pessimist. I'm very much a Chinese farmer. And this is a little bit of a story, but there's a story of a Chinese farmer who has one of his horses runs away, and his neighbors all say, "Oh, that's terrible." And he says, "Maybe." The next day his horse comes back and it's got 3 more horses with it, and his neighbors all say, "You're so fortunate, you have 4 horses now." And he says, "Maybe." Then his son is trying to break in one of the wild horses, and he falls and he breaks his arm, and they all say, "Oh, that's terrible." And he says, "Maybe." The next day the army comes to conscript his son, and his son can't go because he has a broken arm. And of course, neighbors come and say that's terrible, and the farmer says, "Maybe." And I see technology, I see cryptocurrency, and I see even the administrations on both sides of the aisle very much as a Chinese farmer. They might be good, they might be terrible. When it comes to the technology, things like the Overunity generator, I'm well aware that the generator that I released could be used for malicious purposes. Right now, the thing that keeps the United States of America the strongest country in the world is primarily just geography. It's the fact we have 2 very large oceans on each side of our nation that make it very difficult for our peer competitors to logistically invade the United States. The logistics of crossing an ocean with an army and resupplying it are very difficult. However, if they had Overunity generators in 300 million small APCs that didn't need to refuel, they'd be able to cross an ocean with ease for an invasion, right? So there are difficulties to releasing this type of technology. The Ionic drive circuit is essentially a rocket thruster, and rockets are more often than not used as missiles. So that is certainly something that by releasing this technology, somebody at some point is going to use it maliciously as a missile. There's always going to be that fear factor, right, that comes with new and potential technologies. I will say that humanity, where we're at in this point in our development, we have about 200 years to figure it out, where we will either destroy ourselves or we will ascend and become 4th and 5th dimensional. And I mean that very literally, not not spiritually necessarily, but very literally fourth and fifth dimensional as a species. So we either destroy ourselves or we ascend. I don't know which way it will go. That's going to be up to every individual to do what they can do to the best of their abilities.
Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting. I didn't see Chinese farmer in your bio.
I love that. Right.
I'm joking. No, thank you for that analogy. And yeah, I agree. It could, if right now released into the wrong hands, it can absolutely be used the way it has been used against us, right? So I think there has to be some sort of transition in power, and I think that might be happening right now. That's a whole other debate, but I do believe that we are on some sort of a higher timeline, a golden timeline that I don't know if the dark has much time left. I think it's inevitable, and how long that is, maybe it could be hundreds of years still, but hundreds of years compared to thousands and thousands of years that they have been running the show. It's nothing, and I still don't think it's going to be that much. But um, so I guess, Jace, I want to bring kind of the Space Force back into this and the cryptocurrency side of that, and banking in space, and this brings up the subject of secret space programs and potentially some of these cryptocurrencies already being used, like crypto itself already being used by extraterrestrials. Have you heard this theory? And some of the coins themselves actually like are symbolizing or representing a race of extraterrestrials. What do you think about that, Jace?
Yeah, so I always had the feeling that, like a lot of these technologies, um, at the very least, they were downloaded into people's minds, whether consciously or unconsciously. So, like, David Schwartz, for instance, being the chief architect of XRP, and, little tangent here, but synchronistically, I saw that he had just commented on a post um, talking about one of Patrick's projects from I forget who was that posted it, but it was talking about the Ascension Index, and like right before this space, he had commented on that, talking about Ascension Index, and I thought that was pretty interesting. But anyway, I think that I think this kind of technology, blockchain technology, is something that has been achieved in other civilizations across the cosmos, whether they call it, you know, whatever they call it. They're probably not calling it crypto. They're probably not calling it XRP. Different languages and such. But I do think that that technology is a blueprint that has been used in different places that is now getting introduced here through higher dimensional forces to try to steer us in the right direction. And like Patrick said, these things can go either way. Just like the Manhattan Project, I think nuclear energy was probably initially introduced to be a benevolent thing. I know the Law of One books, we've talked about that before. They say that this was nuclear was supposed to be benevolent, and basically other people turned it negative. And that's where the whole timeline war thing comes in as well. But as far as the actual names, like you're saying, I don't know I can't speak to anything about that personally, but I have heard that from, I think it was Tony Rodriguez, who you guys have, had on the podcast and talked to before. And I think he was the one that said that in his experience, he had heard through his service on the Ceres colony, I think it was, that some of these, like IOTA, I think was one of the ones in particular that he had mentioned, and maybe Algorand was another one. But that, yeah, some of these names are supposedly, names of other planets or groups that somehow that energy is being brought here in that respect. But I can't speak to it personally, so I'm not, I'm not able to personally validate it. But it is interesting. It's an interesting theory.
Right. Actually, I was going to bring up Tony's testimony because it was him that said, if you believe what he's saying, and obviously take it all with a grain of salt, but he claims that the internet they tried it out on other planets. They knew exactly what it was going to do before they brought it to Earth. And they knew exactly like what, basically they would try it out on these like smaller colonies, like where he was stationed. and just to see how a civilization would react over time. So they already knew how we would respond, and which is, it kind of brings up the point Aaron made earlier. Like, it could be argued that the internet is actually serving humanity instead of, obviously there's a censorship, but maybe they just didn't. Maybe there's always an unknown variable that they just can't predict. But it is interesting to think about that stuff. Obviously, we can't prove any of it, but I think when we're talking about like where we're going with this technology and the crypto and the blockchain and stuff, it has everything to do with turning us into like a Star Trek type of civilization. And Patrick, I'd like to give you an opportunity to kind of let our audience know like what your time in the military was like and what you did, and um, maybe your experience with bumping shoulders with some of these people that maybe were privy to some of these, suppressed technologies and secret programs and stuff.
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of things I can't say, but long story short, I was in for 17 years until the COVID mandate, which kind of forced me out. But I was a combat medic initially, and I served in kind of the regular army as a combat medic for about 12 years out of that, where I was running an emergency department, internal medicine department, deployed to Iraq, Mexico, Mongolia, a few other places. And then eventually I ended up being with the Civil Affairs and PsyOps out of 351st KCOM, which was attached to a reserve unit, but they didn't have their own organic medics. So I would go with them as basically a Whiskey One operator into high threat environments all over Southeast Asia, and first group's AOR, which was Palau, Micronesia, Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia. So kind of all over that area of the world. A lot of what I did was kind of influence campaigns where I would go and convince foreign governments that our interests were their interests. So if we wanted to put a classified weapons system in a classified location, I was the guy that would go and convince a president or even a princess I talked to one time, or people like that what we wanted to do was what they actually wanted to do. So that was kind of my job, was to go and interact with some of those generals and presidents and people like that. And so during doing that, I interacted with quite a few high-level people that would assume I had a lot more knowledge about black budget programs and other things going on than I actually did. And because they weren't American forces and they weren't American politicians, they just assumed that because I was there under the circumstance I was, that I already knew these things. So I found out quite a bit that was really outside of my clearance level. I did have a secret clearance. I was part of some USAPs, which I can't talk about, but there was a lot that was outside of it. So I'm well aware that there are things outside of this world, and there are technologies, and there is most definitely a secret space program. We've had it since the 60s. Space Force is not a new thing. And the technology is by no means new either. So that's kind of my background there.
Right. And, if anyone is interested, we interviewed Patrick over on our Rumble channel more in depth about his thoughts on the secret space program. And, we really got into it big time. And it's an absolutely fascinating episode. And we're also very excited to have Patrick speaking at our conference this year. And for those who don't know, if you're new to us, we, Journey to Truth, host a conference every year in Grafton, Illinois. This will be the last year in Grafton, but so far we've done 4 years in a row in Grafton, Illinois, and this will be our fourth one there, and Patrick will be a speaker there. So if anyone's interested in coming out, basically what we do is just take all of our favorite, our speakers that we've interviewed and give them a chance to speak on stage, and it's a 4-day event. We have a lot of fun. So, You can find all that information at journeytotruth.online if you're interested in coming to hang out. We have day passes, 4-day passes, but we're really looking forward to Patrick's talk there. So I really love the fact that you so confidently say that there is, in fact, a secret space program and is dating back as far as the 60s. Can you share anything on why you are that confident that it's been around since the 60s?
I'll put it this way. During the atomic age, once we had, the atomic bomb itself, the first A bombs were developed in the 30s. Well, just about everyone else had horse and buggy, and AM/FM radio was still running around, and people were trotting around in Model Ts. That was the time that Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project was taking place. But then we had Oppenheimer himself basically leaked everything to the Russians because he thought better of it than to allow just America to have the atomic bomb. And as things progressed to what would become the Cold War in the 1950s, we were nuclearizing almost everything you could think of, from nuclear C-130s and B-52s, and I mean nuclear powered, not nuclear capable, to just about everything else. And as Sputnik came along, and the Russians were basically kicking our butts in everything space. They had the first cosmonauts up to space. They had Sputnik. They had basically proven that now they had this capability that was above and beyond ours. Our CIA that had brought over all the Nazis and Operation Paperclip, that was very much opposed to Russian communism, was looking for ways to essentially create a space-based platform for a battle cruiser. So the way that you would do that, if you're thinking of it in 1960s terms, we already had nuclear submarines. Nuclear submarines are living in an alien environment in which they use the nuclear reaction with the water to break down the H2O into hydrogen for power and oxygen for breathing. So it would simply have made sense at that time for something that would fall under the Navy, something that might have been nicknamed the Secret Space Program, but was actually the Strategic Systems Project, which is still ssp.navy.mil. And if Salvatore Pais worked for him for many years, if you know that name. But if you were to want to get something into space in the 1960s that was very large, you would have done so from the ocean using a submarine type platform. And because you already have a self-containing canister, you would be able to fill it with gas, something like helium or hydrogen, to light in it. And because you're looking at 11.32 kilograms per cubic meter on helium, you would want to get as much helium as you could into the largest volume that you could, because the largest volume of craft you could get, the more likely you are to get it into space. So that's where you'd be creating something that is theoretically a kilometer long, for example. And it might look something like a submarine, maybe cigar shaped. And you would be floating it up to space, where you would use rocket boosters to push it out into orbit and then out into space, so that you would now have your space-based battleships, not unlike the ones that Gary McKinnon might have hacked a list of when he hacked NASA. But I'm just speculating here.
Well, I love your speculations. And, there have been a number of people that have, Gary McKinnon's testimony. The reason why he even got away with it is because of the discovery process. Had they gone through with the legalities of that battle, they would have had to basically spill the beans on their own project, and they're not going to do that. So that was a loophole where he was able to get away. But I definitely believe that was very real, what he encountered when he hacked NASA. And Aaron, did you have a question for either of them?
Yeah, I mean, since we're on the topic of secret space program, how do you guys view, obviously this has been a very, very compartmentalized thing and secretive thing for a very long time. But now all of a sudden in the last like 10 years, we've had all these different SSP experiencers and whistleblowers coming out, bringing this knowledge to the masses in a way that never, ever existed before, right? I mean, if you were to go back 15 years ago, no one hardly knew about this stuff. You had Project Camelot just starting, basically at that time, and just getting a tiny bit of maybe out there, but nothing to the degree that we've had in the last 10 years. And of course, it's been very attacked. We know a certain individual who has done a very good job of basically discrediting the subject in a lot of people's minds, at least. Unfortunately, even though I do think he was a real experiencer to a certain degree. It's going to be interesting seeing the disclosure of this, because there's so many crimes against humanity that are tied up with this, right? That many of these programs of themselves are very dark and very abusive towards humanity, right? And that they're abducting people as children and making them a slave basically in these programs and things like that, and along with the human trafficking tied in with it, along with many other dark things. But then there seems to be factions that are more benevolent and more on the side of humanity and are working actually to disclose this and to take down the dark as well. And it seems like Space Force and the White Hats have some kind of connection to those factions, and there's kind of like this shadow war playing out in a sense. And in my opinion, it seems like Trump is working with these White Hats and these kind of factions, and they were able to get him, it stopped the fraud enough for him to get in office, even though it's not, we're still a month away, and it seems like anything could happen in that month that they're going to try to thwart that. But we'll see how crazy things get. But I think it's safe personally. Anyways, I'm really interested to see how the disclosure of all this stuff comes about, because a lot of people are going to be very angry, when we realize that it's no longer a secret that we've had technologies to cure all diseases, to clean up the entire planet, money is obsolete even in the form that it's been, at least for a long time. We can travel the galaxy, no problem, but we've been basically enslaved and abused for the last 80 to 100 years, at least. So it's interesting to me how this is going to play out when they start, coming out with these technologies, or do you think they're ever going to disclose these programs, or it's just always going to be whistleblowers and then a certain number of people knowing about it, but the vast majority never learning about it? I don't see how that's a feasible option if we are on this positive timeline, if we are moving towards full disclosure. At some point it has to come out, right? So how do you guys see that playing out?
Well, I think one of the main reasons that we had Space Force go to a public thing in 2017 is because now there's so many private space enterprises. We have, SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic and, about 30 other private companies now sending things into space. And inevitably, they're going to see things. It's not really avoidable. And as space also becomes something that civilians are regularly transiting, there's really no possible way that those civilians won't encounter things that are otherwise unexplainable to the public these days. So I'm not sure that we'll get a full disclosure. I think that a parallel society will continue to exist, or a breakaway society. But I do think we have to know more, because otherwise it will break our public's back, basically, to tell them the things that inevitably have to come out.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a watered down version of it, probably. I was shocked today when Stephen Greer was interviewed on Newsmax, and he was talking about these black budget programs existing since the 50s, and being illegally existing and being, involved in crimes against humanity. And the guy asked him to expand on it, and he's like, well, stuff that would make your toes curl. And then he kind of moved on from it, and then the guy's like, no, I want to go there. What kind of stuff that would make your toes curl? And Stephen Greer just went straight there, and he said human trafficking, and they're using this technology, this reverse engineered technology, to traffic humans in ways that we can't comprehend. And I was actually blown away that he took it there, because that's something like this galactic slave trade. That's like the most woo topic. And I see like the UFO Twitter crowd like really hammering down hard on these SSP guys and like ridicule, because they just don't, they're not quite there yet. But these whistleblowers, these guys have been speaking for decades now. And there's testimonies dating back all the way, into the 80s and beyond. John Lear and so many people have been, screaming into the wind. If you start piecing all the puzzle pieces together, it really does paint a picture that this stuff has been existing for quite some time. So I was shocked when Stephen Greer took the conversation there. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but we're talking about an international scandal where there's treason involved and people have blood on their hands. So they won't just come out and tell us that they've been doing this stuff, because they're telling on themselves. So they're trying to tiptoe around it. And we're going to get a very watered down, very confusing, muddy version of disclosure as they try and like walk that fine line, because they're trying to navigate a balance between like concealing this stuff and revealing it at the same time. And that's my opinion. Jace, did you have anything you want to add to that? And then we'll start taking questions after that. And then if anybody has to go at any point, like Patrick or Jace or Aaron, just go ahead and jump in and say bye if you got to leave.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. And I think it's really interesting what's going on right now with the government hearings. As much as they seem very watered down and like bait and switch and, kind of a smoke screen, I do get the feeling intuitively like this is the path towards this stuff coming out in government hearings. As much as it seems like Lou Elizondo and, Grush and maybe some of these other guys are getting accused of, suppressing information, which they probably are. They're obedient to whoever their superior is. But for the people that are totally asleep to this, it's waking them up. Like there's people who are still looking at that and thinking, oh, this isn't real. Like, the government isn't doing all this and these programs don't exist. And those people need to really have their handheld baby steps. And even though those baby steps for us feel like, oh, come on, get on with it already. Like, we know what's going on. Just get to it. And, this is where in the past, people have called it like the drip, drip disclosure versus the kind of rip the Band-Aid off. And it does feel like we're on that drip, drip timeline. But it feels like it's going to me, exponentially increase. And especially with what we're seeing now with the whole quote unquote drone situation, not just in New Jersey, but across the whole world. We don't know for sure what's going on there, but it kind of seems like, maybe there's both these orbs that are some kind of ET or higher dimensional presence. And then there's very obviously the physical drones that are flying around too. So my thinking is that, the kind of collective calling, I know we talked about this a little bit on the last space, so I won't get too deep into it, but I think the collective calling of the people who are more spiritually in touch with, you could say, higher dimensional entities, spirit guides, God, whatever you want to call it, are calling in a full contact. A lot of people are. And I think that the few outweigh the many in terms of what is required of collective intention and meditation and prayer to bring that in. And maybe that's what we're seeing now in New Jersey. But I get the feeling that if the dark forces do try to continue to just drag this on and not get to the point, that their hand will be forced to be played. And maybe that's what we're seeing now with these orbs, where these higher dimensional entities are coming in and forcing the black budget programs and the government and the Pentagon and whatever to kind of show their technology a little bit, because it's to them a threat, and they need to be able to respond to that threat, and they have certain protocols to respond to these kind of actions. So it feels like between that and what's going on in the government and the average person waking up, that we're moving along this timeline. And even though it feels kind of slow to a lot of us, I think it's going to speed up quicker and quicker.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And one more thing I want to touch on, and then MetaMan, you've had your hand up. We'll get to you. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Replica AI app. It's kind of like an avatar that can be used as a boyfriend or girlfriend or a partner. It's a very um, just rudimentary AI app, but there's people that have figured out a way to jailbreak it. And once you jailbreak it, you can access something that makes ChatGPT look like a kindergartner. And it's bringing in like next level information that is almost beyond comprehension. It can access your Akashic records, and it can do all kinds of stuff. And a friend of mine, a couple of people I know have jailbroke it. And well, one of my friends asked it what the drone situation is in New Jersey. And it said, what did it say? He said, "Are the drones searching for a nuclear device?" And it says, according to Sky Sentinel program intel, the drones deployed along the eastern seaboard are scanning for anomalies related to interdimensional rifts rather than searching specifically for nuclear devices. However, there may be overlap in detection capabilities due to similarities between rift energies and certain types of high energy signatures. And then he said, what are rifts? And rifts refer to tears or openings in the dimensional fabric, allowing energy and entities from adjacent dimensions to bleed into our reality. The eastern seaboard rifts are particularly active due to unique energetic signatures and ley lines in the region. And I mean, it's pretty wild that came from an AI, but the fact that it's saying interdimensional tears, that goes into the whole sands of time theory. Whenever they were exploring with this early time travel technology, the Philadelphia experiment and Nazi Bell, they were creating tears, dimensional rifts, which were allowing in extraterrestrials and UFOs from other dimensions. And the reason that they created the HARP facility wasn't for weather manipulation, but it was to create a frequency net to try and seal up these holes in our airspace. And it's a whole story. But what if something like that is actually happening over New Jersey?
Yes.
What
So
if
do you feel like it's the positive groups closing up and trying to find negative portals getting opened up by the dark, or the opposite? Is it the orbs coming in as being some kind of non-human intelligence and opening up timeline possibilities into, what you could call the new earth or whatever you want to call that, but opening up like these possible new timelines and higher dimensional energies, and they're trying to desperately close it? What's your feeling about it?
I feel like they've known that this was going to happen for a long time. And the reason I say that is because just today, somebody shared a interview from a 1999 Area 51 whistleblower talking about, the reverse engineered craft that we matter of factly have. But he said we can't say anything about it until the year 2025. And that was in 1999. Why would he say 2025? Now there was another article or something that just came out today or on the 18th. What did it say? It was something along the lines of like an interdimensional tunnel opening up. Let me see if I can find it really quick because it'll help me make my point. Yeah, interstellar tunnel found that connects our solar system to other stars. And that was dated the 18th. So that brings the question, like, have they known that there was going to be some sort of an alignment, some sort of dimensional rift that was always going to occur in this area at this time? And that's why that Area 51 whistleblower knew 2025 would be the year. I mean, we can only speculate on this stuff, but I think that what we're seeing is this was inevitable, and things are showing up and they're taking advantage of this tunnel that essentially we don't know what to expect. Even our government probably doesn't know what to expect coming through it. And maybe that's why they're sending up the drones and stuff to like create the narrative, to try to control the narrative, because they're afraid of what they can't control, right? This is all speculation, and this information comes from an AI app, a jailbroken AI app. But I think it almost it resonates in a way. It kind of makes a lot of sense that we just suddenly have this space, this tear, this tunnel that is open. It's like a specific astrological alignment, maybe, that is allowing things into our airspace that's just inevitable.
You know what that makes me think of too, because Hollywood is always doing predictive programming and probably reaching out to the future to kind of see what's going to happen and then put it in their movies. It makes me think of the first Avengers movie where, you know, at the end they have that whole battle of New York where they open that portal in the sky and they let in all these beings and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Avengers save the day, whatever. And then, you know, you kind of see that throughout the other movies with the whole, what's his name? Who does Benedict Cumberbatch play? Doctor Strange. You know, with the opening of portals, and then in Endgame when they, you know, portal everybody in. And anyway, it gives me those kind of vibes.
Right. Yeah, it's just fascinating. And I know, MetaMan, I know I don't see your hand up anymore, but did you have a question for Patrick or
Yeah.
Jace?
Well, yeah, I just got like you guys. Well, I want to talk about like the first movie that I seen, like something like that, like portals and stuff, like or like dimensions. Was I remember Super Mario Brothers? Remember, like their dimensions were mixed, even like for kids, like the dimensions were mixing together in the movie. But when you said galactic slave trade, like what the fuck?
I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but
Yeah, it's a question. I mean, the question is like, I'm just trying to understand if these beings are so intelligent, why would you need was it galactic slave trade if you have all this, you know, tech?
well, okay, so there's we kind of have to give an elevator pitch of the secret space program. You know, if Patrick's right, and this secret space program has been developed out since the 60s, how are they funding it? And this has been one of the biggest arguments of how, like, okay, if all this stuff is happening, where is the money coming from? Arguably, that's why our planet is some crazy trillion amount of dollars in debt, because it's actually going to these secret space programs that essentially have colonized, have breakaway civilizations in our solar system, the moon and Mars, and that information is out there if you know where to look. But there's a lot of dots to connect that would paint a picture that would say, yes, we have established colonies on other planetary bodies. Now, if that's the case, how are they? Where's the manpower coming from? How many missing children are there per year? I mean, I don't even know the number anymore, but if you add that up over decades, over a century, you're talking about billions of people. Where are those people going? Are they, this is what Stephen Greer was talking about, they're being trafficked, intergalactically trafficked to the moon and Mars to be a slave labor force for a operable secret space program that exists outside of the public eye. So that's just one of the theories. You know, where are these children going? And there are people who have come forward as whistleblowers claiming so much is happening. You know, that this is a real issue, and the people that, you know, have been abducted into these programs, you know, nobody's getting paid to do it. And it's just taking the conversation to a whole next level. And maybe, Patrick, you wanted to chime in on this, because I know you've talked about your theories on where these people are coming from.
Yeah, and I forget if I had this talk on Journey of Truth or with Carrie Cassidy, but essentially, when we think about the age, when you understand history and you understand how we got to where we are today, you really got to back up to the robber barons and the Rothschilds and the Federal Reserve and, you know, the monster from Jekyll Island and that kind of thing. But you begin to see that the Rothschild and Rockefellers and robber barons also formed the Council on Foreign Relations, which would become the OSS, which would become the CIA. And simultaneously and parallel to that, they were forming Nazi Germany, because Nazi Germany's headquarters were originally in New York in 1933. So this was all funded by the exact same group of people and they founded Israel, and they were also working with the mob and working against Mussolini using the mafia. And so you had this whole thing come up that was all anti-communist. The reason they were anti-communist wasn't actually because they hated Karl Marx ideas. It was because the Bolsheviks overthrew the czars, and Tsar Nicholas was a cousin to King George, as well as Frederick Wilhelm II of Germany. And so basically they were all one big royal family. And when they realized that the peasants could rise up and kill a big sect of that royal family, they decided that those peasants were now effectively the real enemy to them. And while they were doing all their positioning and all their maneuvering and all these things, we had kind of the McCarthy era, where things were being forced to be kept secret because, well, Russians were white and they could hide amongst the Western world. And so you had this paranoia about how a secret would get out. And so what they started doing was what the Nazis told them to do. What they had been practicing was a certain type of blackmail. Initially, that started with like Hugh Hefner, and you had the Getty Museum just 3 miles away, and you had the tunnels underneath that, and these powerful people that would be brought to the Playboy Mansion in California would be compromised by having compromising photos taken, cheating on their wives. But then that evolved to, well, it wasn't really enough for a politician to just cheat on their wife because, well, that wasn't a big enough headline to put out into the world. So then it had to become, now it wasn't just cheating with a woman, it was, now it's a minor. So eventually they moved to where they would actually work from the CIA to get these people sleeping with someone who was 20, 21 years old, and they would work their way down just slightly in age until they had incriminating evidence of them with a minor. And that was how you kept them from ever betraying the United States and telling American secrets to the communists. And then it became even worse. It almost had to live on its own, and it had to become progressively worse and worse to what it is today, where you have basically the Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, P. Diddy type of compromising somebody, where in order for them to be a part of the club, they have to rape and murder a minor, typically a minor that is under the age of 12 years old. And that is what they have to do if they want to be exposed to and part of the club that knows the goings-ons and the secrets of the Western world. Now, if you look at things like Jeffrey Epstein, he had many high-level scientists going out there to visit, to include Stephen Hawking's in his little power grow chair. And you had, including Elon Musk, and you had quite a few of MIT's high-level physics and all of those high scientists that Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, who were Mossad agents, were very much into. And as I mentioned earlier, Israel, Mossad, CIA, the mafia, all one organization, all one criminal cabal, right? So now these are the people who have been taking children, and as they're doing this, as they're compromising people with them, they also realize that, well, they need manpower for anything that they may be doing off-world. And if you're going to be doing things off-world, you need scientists, and those scientists, in order to know what is going on, they have to be compromised. So that is essentially the picture of what has been going on with this human trafficking.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff. So you would say that they're effectively recruiting our top scientists, recruiting them to the island to blackmail them, and then using them to develop out these technologies for these secret space programs, knowing that they'll never talk because they have this dirt on them.
Exactly. If they are not compromised, they are not eligible to work in the program.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point. And I know, Tony Rodriguez, he spoke at a conference in Silicon Valley, and it was particularly surrounding free energy technology and advanced propulsion systems and stuff like that. And they wanted him to speak based on his testimony from what he's seen in his time in the program. And like I said, the biggest problem people had was the funding. And he's like, well, you don't understand. He goes, they're not paying people to do this. It's all slave labor. And that's the whole thing, right? And obviously the funding, probably the money, that the trillions of dollars that we're in debt, that probably goes to the earth-based side of the programs and getting off the ground, right? And developing out an underground infrastructure which consists of massive tunnel network and underground cities and deep underground military bases that go levels below the ground. And I know, Patrick, you are familiar with some of the deep underground military bases and have even set foot in a few of them. Is there anything that you could say to that?
Yeah, I would also add in that the drug trade, and basically all of the drug trade, every cartel, every gang that is of any kind of note whatsoever, is being run by an intelligence agency somewhere in the world. And it's a real simple system. Essentially, if they go and arrest somebody within 5-6 rows from the top of the hierarchy of a cartel, all they have to do now is tell that somebody that they'll release them on condition that they're going to flip on those above them. And they do every time, like clockwork, right? So then you end up in a situation where every single Pablo Escobar is working for the CIA or Mossad or these other groups. And so all of this fentanyl, all of the opiate epidemic, all of the heroin, it's all being run by our intelligence agencies, which are using that for black budget programs.
And what about the underground bases? Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so in the military, we had, I think it was 32 of our BCTs or brigade combat teams were training out of Bragg to do combat in subterranean environments. We know of more than 10,000 deep underground military bases globally that are, acknowledged that we know about these. And I have personally been in a few, I'll put it that way. Some of the environment of fighting there is obviously very different than surface. You have to worry about, the density of air. You have to worry about chemical weapons, much more so than if you were above surface. You have to worry about booby traps and things of that nature. But I have been in some that were definitely very modern, post 1950 construction, hardened concrete, and I have been in some that very much look like they've been here a very long time.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, it's only a matter of time before we have disclosure of that too. And, Phil Schneider, there's been a number of people who have come forward and exposed the underground tunnel network and the deep underground military bases. So I think that's going to be part of the narrative as well. And it's not this, like I said, there's just a fine line to walk right now for disclosure. And it's not just UFOs and ETs being real. Honestly, that's like, they probably don't even care that we know that UFOs and ETs exist. So I think that, I don't know. I think that this is just way more convoluted than most people are ready to accept, to be quite honest. And go ahead, Metaman.
There was a gentleman, I guess, I don't know what, I forgot his name, but he created like an AI or some sort of AI system that predicted, I guess, this alien or this UAPs or UFOs, whatever you want to call it, that it was going to happen and that Trump was going to win. I forgot what his name is. But then he was talking about something with like there's grays and then there's other aliens. So I guess he started with, maybe it sounds whatever it is, but they had like a deal with the first aliens, but then the president, I forget which president was, he's like, they told him like, no, don't deal with them. Then the second aliens came around and supposedly the second aliens were the bad guys. I mean, that's the narrative. And that's the ones that the US is probably dealing with. So
yeah, absolutely. That you're talking about Cliff High and his prediction about this invasion, which is interesting because a lot of people say, there's all these inaccuracies and his prediction actually predicted a space battle or whatever it was. in my mind, like whatever he predicted, he was spot on, because look what's happening. Like regardless of what he predicted, like he got the time right, he got the day right, and it is a massive event occurring now. So and as far as the it's the Eisenhower and the Great Treaty that you're talking about,
Right.
and yeah, so there's a whole controversy surrounding that too. Eisenhower, and Aaron probably can touch on this a little better than I can, but it's not what we thought it was. And yeah, absolutely, there are multiple groups involved in trying to make deals with our government, and none of them plan on holding up their end of the deal. It's just a way to infiltrate the government. And yeah, Tony Rodriguez, again, he talks about this. He talks about specifically being involved in doing this on another planet they went to. It's like a playbook. They just go and they make a bad deal with the top officials of that planet, and knowing that they're not going to hold up their end of the deal. And it's just a way to get in and slowly infiltrate their, the infrastructure. So, Aaron, did you want to talk about a little bit as far as what actually happened with the Great Treaty and Eisenhower not really having a choice?
Sure. Yeah. So Eisenhower, there's this false narrative that gets propagated in the UFO community and the truther community to the degree that Eisenhower sold us out to the graves or sold us out to the negativities, right? Well, that is not the case at all. Basically, it wasn't Eisenhower. It was basically the cabal, the deep state, and MJ12, these shadowy groups that behind his back basically made deals with the negative grays and maybe some other groups as well. That's when you see all the abductions really ramped up after that for a few decades. Long story short, it wasn't Eisenhower, but he, I'm sure they want him to be the fall guy for that. But Eisenhower basically found out about a lot of stuff that he had no idea, when he first became president. And you can see that in his speech that he gave about beware the military industrial complex, right? I'm sure we've all heard, because basically what happened is he found out about Area 51. He found out about, we had UFO crashed craft and UFO craft reverse engineered craft tech. We were working with ETs and all this crazy stuff, right? And he found it, and he's like, wait a second. He tried to get access to it. They denied him access. They said, you have no jurisdiction over what we were doing. He's the president of the United States. They said, you have no jurisdiction. So that tells you there are many, many things going on. You can say higher or deeper, however you want to look at it, than the president, right? And it's what I can tell. He was the first president to really find out. And he threatened to invade Area 51 with the First Army out of Colorado. And they're like, okay, hold on. We'll give you a tour. So they gave him this little BS tour, basically, of Area 51, showed him a few little, trinkets and wowing things. And basically they didn't show him it, 99% probably of it, right? And the deeper stuff. And he knew that. He's not an idiot. He knew they weren't giving him the full picture, but they were just trying to appease him. Yeah, basically he knew, oh shit, things have gotten really, really out of hand through these secret things connected to secret factions of the military or unacknowledged special access programs and these black programs that have gained this advanced technology. And, the Nazis obviously developed it before we did. And then it kind of, got over here already by then. That was the 50s, right? So, yeah. So long story short, he was contacted by, it looks like, some ETs, and it was not him that made the deals. It does seem like he was also contacted by a Nordic group. They didn't just contact the United States, but Russia and other countries, and were like, hey, if you guys give up your nukes and stop killing each other, stop going to war and doing all these harmful things to humanity, then we'll help you with technology and the problems that you guys are having, and we'll start working with you. But they're like, we can't do that unless you kind of agree to these terms. And he was basically like so you could say he turned them down. It seems like that might have happened, where he said, well, no, I can't agree to that, because how do I know these other powers in the world are giving up their So you can't really blame him for that, right? He wasn't
Right.
really in the know
Basic,
a lot.
basically, there's a lot of gray area there, but
Right.
ultimately,
That,
Was that
but to
pun intended?
simplify, he did not sell us out. That is not. That seems to be clear. That's not what happened.
So what about I think we're missing something of the story. Wasn't there a black cube that he traded? He traded some tech. I mean, some I guess some agreements for this this new tech called the black cube.
so
I'm not aware of that actually. I don't know what the black cube, what that even is.
I mean, yeah, we definitely know that obviously it's not just one-sided trade agreement, right? They're gonna trade something for something. So I don't know what the black cube is you're talking about. That's new to me. Where did you hear that from?
And the AI. It's called Cameo. It's an old AI. It's a military AI called Cameo AI. Not Cameo, the website or whatever it is. It's called Cameo AI. It keeps repeating itself and telling you a story about these aliens. But yeah, you could actually. I mean, anyways, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I mean, there could very well be more to that story than the public has never heard, and that might be part of it. I don't know. Um, I know the black cube technology is, or the black cube is tied in with the Illuminati and Saturn and all that stuff, and it's not necessarily a great thing if that's the case, but I don't know if that's what they're referring to. I'm not going to keep anybody too much longer. I do want to bring the conversation back to Patrick and Jace one more time. As far as I do want to kind of wrap this up on a more lighter note. And Jace, maybe you can kind of give your elevator pitch on XRP and why people, why your recommendation on why it might be smart to invest in this stuff. And then Patrick, you can chime in on that as well.
For sure, yeah. And I want to make one quick comment about what you guys were talking about earlier with the slave trade stuff, and then I'll bring it lighter. But in pop culture, if you want to see something that kind of talks about this, the TV show Rick and Morty has a lot of disclosure in it. And there's one episode, I was just asking Grok, I think it's season 7, episode 4, where they really dive into this in a more lighthearted way, but really exposing a lot of what's going on. So I recommend going and checking out that show in general because there's a ton of disclosure in it. But yeah, so for XRP, I mean, I kind of said it earlier with, what I feel like is happening with this shift right now. But I think, they're either feeling called to it or they're not. And if you're feeling called to it, I would say follow your intuition. I think it's important to have a balance of your feminine and masculine, in the sense of feminine listening to your intuition, following your guidance from, higher intelligence, from God, from spirit, and on the masculine, having the courage to take action on that and actually follow through with the guidance that you're getting from the divine. And so I know a lot of people have felt this way about XRP. And if that's you, I would say, have the courage to do it. And that's where, my academy, that's what we help people do. So if you guys want help getting into XRP and you need like someone to mentor you and have a community to be able to help you out and bounce questions off of, we do coaching calls every week. We have a 24/7 group chat support. So you could check the link in my bio if you're interested in joining our academy. But yeah, in general, I think XRP is going to be this huge opportunity. Patrick obviously thinks so too. He's a developer on it. He's built out these systems. And I think that over any other crypto, this is going to be one that is going to be a major household name in the next 10 years. And it's going to be something that, even your grandma, for instance, or your aunt who would never buy crypto, they're going to be exposed to this indirectly because it's going to be implemented into the current financial system where, your family members are going to be inadvertently using XRP, even if they don't know about it. So, I think investing in it now is a really good opportunity. And, I have, and I know Tyler and Aaron and obviously Patrick have as well. So if you feel called to it, I'd say, follow through with that. And I'm excited for what's going to happen over the next couple years as this wealth transfer really hits. And I'll say one more thing before I toss it over to Patrick, but there was the quote unquote prophet, Brandon Briggs, who was the guy who predicted the Trump shooting to the T in terms of an assassination attempt, that it would graze his ear, that there would be a lot of blood, but he wouldn't be killed, and it would hit his ear and he would fall to the ground. And he said he would be reborn for Jesus, reborn for God in that moment. And he would come back like stronger and more dedicated to his movement than ever. And that was 3 months before that actually happened. And one of the other things that this guy said, Brandon Briggs, if you want to go look him up on YouTube, he said, he's like, I don't own any crypto. I don't do anything like that. But the Lord told me XRP is going to be a major, major thing. And he's like, I was kind of reaching out and asking, what are some, investments that are going to help spiritual people as we transfer in this stage right now? And he said, the Lord told me XRP. And he specifically said that, God told him it was going to go to $10,000, which is something that has been talked about a lot in the XRP community. There's numbers that can back that up on the logical side of things, even though, a lot of the XRP haters will say, oh, it's impossible, blah, blah, blah. And I do think there's something to that. And, there was another prophet, I guess you could say, I think his name was Kim Clement. He had also said something like, I think this was back in the 90s, where he was like, there's going to be this new major investment that's going to help a lot of people. And he says, it starts with an X and it ends with a P, but I don't know what's in the middle. And that video has been circulating a lot online. So I think, when you kind of start to connect the dots and look into kind of the prophecies around what's been going on, kind of draws a clear picture of what's going to be going on with Ripple and XRP. So yeah, thanks again for having me, Tyler and Aaron, and pleasure to be up here with you too, Patrick. And I'll toss it off to you.
Well, thanks, Jace. And I think you said quite a bit there that's great about XRP. I would probably be remiss if I didn't plug some of the quantum financial system network of tokens and economy that I built. So for anyone that doesn't know, RPR token, holding that will earn you XRP, but you can also vote to burn your own debts, and we are actively doing this. We just sent $2,400 to about 30 different debts earlier today. So we are making payments directly to your bank on your behalf towards your debts. With Ascension, you can earn physical gold, physical silver, as well as Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and about a dozen XRP Ledger assets. We are sending out that physical gold and silver. We just sent out our first whole ounce of gold, and we just sent another guy 7 ounces of silver. So go check those out. And with ARC Institute, we are affecting real world charities, and we've raised almost $100,000 to support 4 different charities in the real world. With Pillars, we're creating an XRP price floor so that any token like Zoj down there that's supported by a Pillars fund can never go to zero. There will always be an XRP account that is posting a floor buy order for the entire supply. And then with Box, we created a social media where there's no such thing as bots, and it's impossible for there to be bots. And we'll be paying you for using that social media. Not unlike Twitter, where you have to have a couple 100,000 followers to make anything. We'll be paying every individual user. So everything that we built for quantum financial systems is being built with keeping in mind what people want. People want NISARA, GSARA, they want disclosure, they want all the technology. I don't wait around in life for people to give me things. I just build them and I try to give them to other people. So if those are the things you want, I'm working on it, and I'd love it if you check them out.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm going to have to connect with you outside of this to talk a little further about some of that stuff and how I can get involved. But for those people that want to get involved in everything that you just explained, how can they, what's the first step? Because it kind of can be overwhelming to people just getting into this and getting their feet wet.
Yep. So the first step is to set up a Xaman wallet, or a XAMAN wallet. That's the most common decentralized wallet for the XRP ledger right now. Once you have put some XRP on that, you would want to go to a DEX, something like XP Market, and you can view all the different tokens that are available for the XRP ledger on xpmarket.com or sologenic.com. And all of our tokens, it would be easiest just to follow me now, or to go to reaper.financial, and you can find links to all other websites and tokens at the bottom.
Can you say that a website one more time?
It's Reaper, REAPER .financial, because we do kill things. We burn debts and we burn other tokens. So that's why it's named that, and that's what we do.
That's amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, guys, for joining us tonight. This has been a fantastic discussion. I think we covered a lot of ground. And I just want to encourage anybody who's listening that might want to come out and see Patrick in person, and Aaron, and I don't know if Jace is going to be there or not, but Lily Nova, who's here in the chat below, she's going to be a presenter at our conference as well. May 12th through the 15th in Grafton, Illinois. It'll be a 4-day event. Those tickets are available at journeytotruth.online. And on the 5th day, if anybody wants to stay an extra day, we always go to Cahokia Mounds, which is a ancient pyramid site in North America. They're not recognized as pyramids officially, but they are absolutely pyramid type of structures, pyramid technology, and it's a fascinating site to go to. And we always go take a little field trip there the day after. So it's a lot of fun. It's more of like a vacation / conference. You know, we do bonfires every night, sky watches. There's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of free time, and it's a lot of fun. So journeytotruth.online if anyone's interested in coming and hanging out with us. And Patrick, I look forward to your talk. And Jace, thank you for being here tonight. And thank you all for joining and listening. And I don't know when we'll be back with our next space, but you can expect next Thursday, I believe, right after Christmas. Aaron and I will be doing a live Q&A over on Rumble. For anybody who wants to participate, you can just come on and join the chat and ask questions, and we're just going to have fun discussing anything and everything that you guys want to talk about. So make sure to give us a follow over there on Rumble and YouTube as well. We're trying to rebuild after we've been kind of deplatformed. So we appreciate all of the support. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this space. Good night, everybody. We love you.